Looking for adventure in 2023? How does island hopping in Thailand sound? What about marveling at waterfalls in Iceland? Or tapas with your new BFFs in Seville? What about discovering the world with an awesome group of 18 to 35s? Explore all of this and more with Kentucky. You'll sleep in the coolest accommodation and learn from local guides and experts. Visit Kentucky.com. That's CONTIKI.com to book your next adventure. Kentucky. Travel together.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
92% because of a bike?
Not just bikes. We also make treadmills and rowers.
Oh, let me guess, for elite athletes only, right?
Nope. It doesn't matter if you're an avid exerciser or new to working out. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try Peloton bikes, tread, or row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.
Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. I'm your host, Bethany Moore. I'm the Director of Communications at the National Cannabis Industry Association. Today, I have back on the show Charlie Alovisetti. He's a partner at Vicente Sederberg and chair of the firm's corporate department. He's recognized by Chambers and Partners as one of the top cannabis lawyers in the U.S. and is co-author of The Business of Cannabis, Understanding Law, Finance, and Governance in America's Newest Industry. Prior to joining Vicente Sederberg, he worked as an associate in the New York offices of Latham & Watkins and Goodwin, where he represented public companies and private equity sponsors and their portfolio companies in a range of corporate transactions. He's admitted to practice in Colorado, Massachusetts, and New York. Welcome back to the show, Charlie.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Excellent. So it has been a while, but let's cover some basics here about you. In addition to what I shared, what is more of your professional background and experience, and what led you to get involved in this wild and wacky cannabis industry?
Yeah, so I was a traditional kind of corporate lawyer doing mostly M&A. At the time I got interested in cannabis, I was in the private equity group at Goodwin in New York. So it was mostly private equity fund backed M&A. Didn't really have an industry focus. I was junior at the time, so I was sort of doing whatever I was told to do. But I didn't really like sort of jumping between industries and really not having any idea about what the underlying logic of the deals were. So, I started looking around in 2013 to think about what industry, right? I'm a lawyer, but what industry am I interested in? What industry would I like to work with? And I narrowed it down to 3 areas where I thought that there was going to be, growth in the future, because I wanted to get in on the ground floor or something. One was privacy law, which I guess would have been might have worked out. 2 was probably beyond the subject here, but just fracking. I thought that was going to be a huge growth area at the time. People were talking about legalizing it in New York State, which hasn't happened, but so that would have been pretty disastrous. And then cannabis, which at the time had started picking up steam. So I did some research, started attending some meetings in New York. I was joined the New York City Bar Association Drugs and the Law Committee. So I tried to dip my toes into it, and then I started kind of like setting the stage with my parents to try and prepare them for what I was going to do.
Yes, I get that. How did they handle the transition into cannabis, and were they nervous for you? I hear that a lot.
No, well, the other big part of it was it involved moving from New York, where I had lived for 10 years and where my family's kind of from, to Denver. So that was a big piece of it, as well. As I just remember I met my dad at the Wolfgang's bar. So I used to work in the New York Times building, just right across the street from Port Authority, and there's a steakhouse on the first floor, which is great. And I took my dad to the steakhouse and I was explaining my game plan to him. And I had to print out a map of the US showing all the states that had legalized. I was like, this is my game plan. So yeah, no, I mean he thought it was interesting, but I mean they're glad now. I actually moved. I live now like 3 blocks away from my parents, so it's come full circle.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. And you lived here in Denver for some time. I definitely remember running into you at our industry socials and caucuses and so on with the Vicente Sederberg crew as well. Speaking of Vicente Sederberg law firm, which is very well known, especially here in Colorado, for helping to pass Regulation 64, what is the latest and greatest happenings at Vicente Sederberg?
I guess the big change at the firm is then Christian Sederberg is sort of stepping away to focus on policy work.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah, so he's kind of stepping down from an active role at the firm to, because we've got VS Strategies,
Yes.
which is sort of like I guess sister company or affiliate company, whatever you want to call it, it's much more focused on policy work. So which is Jordan Wellington over there. Those guys do a great job. So he's focusing more on that. We just made 5 new partners. Got 5 new partners, and then we've kind of moved to this like kind of lifestyle of working from home, and
yeah,
the balance of the firm. With the change of the markets, we'll talk about New York and why it may not be as big as I hope, but it's a bit of a shift culturally, right? Like as you get cannabis moving east, Denver is, where we were founded, but now like we have to think of ourselves more of a national firm.
Yeah.
So that's a big change, is sort of like figuring out, all these different markets and how to help people in all these different markets.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And, I remember Vicente Sederberg's quote unquote marijuana mansion off of Grant Street, which is now a marijuana museum.
Have you been to the museum?
I have not. I haven't been in there. It's not a priority on my list to do, but if I happen to stumble in there one of these days, I'll let you know what it's like.
I guess I'm just, now it's like, I'm curious because I worked there, for almost 2 years, I think, before we moved to the current address.
Yeah, yeah.
Curious what they did with my old office.
Sure. Yes. The nostalgia of having worked in that building myself also, like when NCIA was very, very small, we were up in the attic and then we were in the cottage, cannabis cottage, as we called it, right behind the building as well. So I've got some nostalgia, personally speaking, as well. Absolutely. I'll check that out. I'll put it higher up on the to-do list and see what's going on in there. So it's been a while since you were on the show, and I know last time you had just published a book, as I mentioned earlier. It's called The Cannabis Business: Understanding Law, Finance, and Governance in America's Newest Industry. And all the author profits are going to the Last Prisoner Project. So I want to check in and hear what's going on with your book.
So we published it, and I guess, I think we've done pretty well. I wish I had more profits to donate, but it's tough to make money in the publishing world these days,
Yes.
Particularly if you're writing a textbook about law, which is not, I guess like one of the top sellers in terms of what books there's. Though I was reading something that said there were like 28 books, maybe last year, the 2 years before, there are 28 books in a given year that sell over 500,000 copies. Only 28 books that do that.
Yeah.
We were sad we were not one of them. We do have a 5-star rating on Amazon, so it was a good experience.
Right, going through the whole experience of writing it, publishing it, promoting it. It's a lot. Certainly. Yeah, we need to get some college class to make that required reading for you or something that might help.
Oh, that's what I was looking up. Oh yeah, and Colleen Hoover apparently wrote 8 of the top 28 books.
Oh, who's she?
So
She's doing great.
Yeah, she writes like dramatic personal
Romance
stories.
novels.
There's a romance. It's not like a romance. There's romance in it, but it's not like a traditional romance novel. This is what I was looking at, the perfect blend of sexiness, emotion, and intrigue. It's Colleen's best, most exciting book to date.
All right.
So
All right.
that seems
If
like
I
a good
ever
book
make
for a plane.
if I ever make a career change, I'm gonna get into writing whatever
Yeah,
she's writing.
have her on the podcast. She can tell you how to write a bestseller.
Love that. Love that. Okay, let's take our first commercial break and then we'll come back and talk about cannabis and finance and law and governance. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice will return once we give a voice to our sponsors.
Looking for adventure in 2023? How does island hopping in Thailand sound? What about marveling at waterfalls in Iceland? Or tapas with your new BFFs in Seville? What about discovering the world with an awesome group of 18 to 35? Explore all of this and more with Kentucky. You'll sleep in the coolest accommodation and learn from local guides and experts. Visit Kentucky.com. That's CONTIKI.com to book your next adventure. Kentucky. Travel together.
All right, we're back on NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. I'm your host, Bethany Moore with NCIA. I'm talking with Charlie Alovisetti from Vicente Sederberg, and we're talking here about some nitty-gritty cannabis financing stuff, which is already pretty tough for our industry. Our licensed operators are dealing with lots of burdens and complexities and jump ropes to jump over. And it is particularly tough for social equity financing for those seeking to obtain an equity license, jumping through hoops, lots of challenges. Let's talk more about those challenges that social equity license operators are dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. So, we've wrapped a bunch of social equity licensees, and raising money in cannabis is tough these days. I mean, a few years ago it was a lot easier, but raising money in general is pretty difficult, right? You're trying to convince someone to give you their money to try and turn into something else. So they're taking a big risk. So I think the primary challenge with social equity financing, and this is from the perspective of someone who wins one of these licenses, is that depending on the state, there are restrictions on how much of your company you can sell. So usually you have to maintain 51% of the company. So, that means you can only sell 49% of it, which usually isn't an issue, but you got to keep in mind that if you have to maintain 51% and you raise an initial round of capital, you sell 20% of the company, let's say, the next time that comes around where you have to raise capital, the dilution is got to come completely out of that first round of investors, because you can't dip below 51% without putting the license at risk. So that sometimes investors have trouble with, because then they're like, well, that means if you raise more money in the future, you get to keep 51%, but I get sort of doubly diluted. So that can be a challenge. And then that's compounded by the other issues, which is, generally speaking, these states, like a Massachusetts will basically say the social equity licensee has to, control things, right?
Yeah.
So, which, I totally understand why the rules say that. But you got to think about the investors will often want to protect their investment and have certain blocking rights.
Yeah.
So, now you have to balance the investors' sort of demands or expectations with respect to their blocking rights against the state regulations.
Yeah, there's a misalignment there. That makes
So you're trying to balance two needs, right?
Yeah.
The need to keep the license in good standing, and then the need to keep your investors happy, because if neither works, then the deal blows up.
Mm-hmm.
And you also, obviously sometimes you have to kind of do whatever you do to get it off the ground, but you have to think about down the line. It can be challenging. It can be challenging down the line, in the sense that, like I just mentioned, like the first round of financing might not create any issues, but then like the next round of financing could create an issue.
Got it.
That is just something to be aware of. The other big challenge I find with social equity licensing is, a lot of times social equity licensees we talk to, they're like, well, they'll say, I want my community to have an opportunity to invest in this business.
Yeah.
So they can make money. But you start running up against federal securities laws. So federal securities laws can make it difficult to raise money from unaccredited investors. So being an accredited investor is a certain financial level. They've also expanded the definition now to pick up certain people that are just considered kind of sophisticated in the world of deals. So people that are accountants or lawyers can qualify sometimes to be accredited investors. It's not a super high standard. But I mean, still the average person is likely not to qualify as an accredited investor.
Gotcha.
So like, for example, like you would either have a net worth over $1 million, excluding your primary residence, or have income over 200K individually or 300K as a joint filer in each of the prior 2 years, and that's going to continue.
Okay.
Or the investment professional criteria I talked about, which is like, you've done a Series 7, which is the stock work. So if
not very common for social equity licensees to be able to achieve that financial
so if
level.
you want to have, like, say 100 people chip into your company, and then none of them are accredited, it creates a lot of securities law issues, because it's not to say that you can't do it, but that all the ways of doing it create complexity, and complexity, increases legal costs, it increases regulatory risk and all that stuff. So that's also something to think about. And I mean, I've had this discussion with people, and I think there are two ways of looking about it. One is that, hey, you're basically excluding this group of people from the opportunity to make money in the cannabis industry. And my counterpoint to that is just, you're also preventing them from losing a lot of money in a speculative investment. Because I think the way the regulators would look at it is, if you're not accredited, what would happen if you lost a $50,000 investment or $25,000 investment? I mean, if you're accredited, hopefully that's not a big deal to you. But if you're unaccredited, I mean, $25,000 is a lot of money.
Sure.
And, to someone who doesn't have a lot of money, that can be
devastating.
Devastating. Yeah, exactly. So, someone who loses a devastating amount of money is more likely to, call the regulators, to sue you, to be really upset, to have it, to lose housing or not be able to send their kid to school. So, it's like all these horrible things. So, it does cut both ways. So that's another challenge I find. And, you see things like, you hear a lot of talk about crowdfunding.
Yes. Yeah, sure. GoFundMe, whatever.
Yeah. So there's GoFundMe, which is
kind of casual.
Yeah, it's not really an equity investment. I mean, that's basically just charity.
Yeah.
You don't own any equity, but there's also something this was also created by the Jobs Act, which was passed under Obama, which basically says you can set up these portals online that allow you to raise money. And you can take in sort of small amounts of money from people. And so there are a bunch of these websites out there that you can look up, and they'll get you set up, but they take a pretty big cut of the money you raise. And then you have to file a document, a Reg CF with the SEC, which that takes a lot of time, and it's expensive from a legal perspective. So, I caution people to think about that, because that's a Reg CF offering. And so, we've prepared these offerings for Reg CF, but it's like, I mean, it's a substantial document. It's not the kind of thing that you can sort of, it's a Form C, by the way, for those that care, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to like throw together. And
Okay.
then if it's an ongoing business, you also sometimes have like accounting requirements in terms of your financials. So there's not a perfect solution. There's a bunch. There's pros and cons to different approaches.
Yeah, sounds like something that you can't exactly get taken care of at H&R Block. So
No. So it's like, and it's all this stuff costs money, right?
yeah.
So
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, thanks for going through some of those challenges and opportunities that social equity operators or license applicants are facing. And let's go ahead and take our second commercial break and then pivot to talking about what's going on in the Northeast area of the country, which is where you're currently at. So let's go ahead and take that commercial break and then we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice will return once we give a voice to our sponsors.
All right, we're back on NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. And before I ask our guest, Charlie Alovisetti from Vicente Sederberg, the next question, I want to let all of our listeners know that we are currently on tour going to 11, 12, something like that, cities across the country. We are hosting our evening networking receptions called Industry Socials. They're awesome opportunities to meet other NCIA members, network with those that are in the cannabis industry, and meet NCIA staff who can tell you more about what's going on at the organization. So be sure to head to our website, thecannabisindustry.org, and check out our event schedule. Definitely register. If you're an active NCIA member, there are complimentary tickets available for you to claim. Seedling members get 2, blooming members get 3, and our evergreen members get 5. I think that's right. Yeah, so don't leave those tickets on the table. Be sure to join us at all these events across the country. The next one, as of this episode airing, will be on February 22nd in St. Louis, Missouri. And then we're headed to Seattle, Washington, Boston, Miami, Portland, Oregon, New York, Chicago, and Detroit. So absolutely check out our events page and plan to register and join us. And speaking of New York and Massachusetts, so you're based up in that area now. All those states up in that area are probably the newer states that are legalizing, with the exception of a couple others in the Midwest. But these states are the colonial states, right? They're much smaller and closer together, and you can drive through like 8 different states in an afternoon, basically. So Massachusetts is maturing a little bit because it's been a couple of years since they legalized cannabis. But what's the latest and greatest legalization news up in the northeast part of the country?
yeah, so I'll go through it real quick, and then I guess I'm going to focus in on New York, so we can get into kind of the details of one state, because you could talk a whole hour talking about any one of these states. But so you've now got, in the Northeast, there are a bunch of states that have legalized adult use, but there haven't been adult use sales. I mean, it's a little bit further behind than that. They haven't really issued adult use licenses yet. So like you've got your Virginias and your Marylands, where it's passed. Though I don't know the latest Virginia off the top of my head. I think that the Republican legislature has slowed things down a bit.
Yeah.
But you got, so those are the states where it's coming, not here yet. Then you've got, Pennsylvania, which I think looks like an outlier in the sense that it's just medical right now, no adult use for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of smaller states that we won't get into much, like Rhode Island and Delaware. Delaware, I think, has submitted it. But anyway, Rhode Island has legalized. And then I think you get to the again, the smaller states that have adult use that's active, right? Your Vermonts, your Maines, both have active adult use sales right now.
Yep.
New Hampshire is sort of an outlier in that respect in New England right now in terms of is limited medical market and no adult use immediately on the horizon. And then, what I view as sort of like the game changers, which is the tri-state area. So New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and there are sales ongoing in each of those states right now for adult use, which I view as sort of like a huge turning point for the industry. And then, I guess like to tie it back to my personal narrative here, but I think New York is like an example of the changes you've seen happen in the industry and then the country writ large over the past, call it 8 years, which is that, New York City right now, I mean, the entire city smells like weed.
I've heard that, yes.
Pretty much 24/7. The entire city smells like weed.
That's
there
funny.
are like massive amounts of completely unregulated cannabis sales occurring, in the open. There were crackdowns on the vans that were going around Manhattan.
Oh, I hadn't heard about the vans.
Yeah, there were vans. There were like basically people also set up these like, it looked like a hot dog stand, but it would sell weed.
Oh my gosh.
Or like the nut stands that they have. So it'd be like that except for weed.
Wow, innovative entrepreneurs out there.
Well, I think what happened is people realized that, there wasn't going to be, once the bill passed, right? And the bill basically decriminalized it right off the bat and said,
Yes.
You're supposed to be able to smoke anywhere you can smoke cigarettes. But people sort of quickly realized that the NYPD basically was like, well, all right, it's legal, fine. And, we're not going to get involved. And now, there's a huge number of unlicensed stores operating in New York, in addition to the fact that, all the sort of bodegas also now sell, a range of products, like including, Delta 8 type stuff, which is illegal under New York state law, but it's effectively unenforced.
Yeah.
So now the Office of Cannabis Management keeps saying that there's going to be a crackdown, and everyone thinks this crackdown's coming because the success of the New York industry, I think, will rely on it. But so that's kind of the background here.
Yeah.
So you've got, and I think that sort of like strength of the illicit market is similar to California, in terms of it is a long-standing, thriving illicit market, and the tie to California is also that you can buy California brands in New York,
Okay.
pretty easily now.
That's technically not legal.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, has it been shipped from California or is it counterfeited? I don't know.
Yeah, great question. Great concerns. Absolutely. We do not have interstate commerce capabilities yet. So yeah, that's a lot to think of. Oh man, I feel like we could go down such a rabbit hole talking about all of this as well. I'll have to have you back on the show pretty soon so we can keep the conversation going. We have run out of time, but God, thank you so much for all this really valuable information. We'll definitely have to follow up soon because there's just so much more to talk about, and there's a lot of great knowledge that you have to share with our listeners. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice. Until next time.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.
And now another no-brainer money-saving tip from Progressive.
That doesn't sound good.
Paper shredder's jammed, but I think I fixed it.
Oh, well, try shredding these $50 bills then.
Seems like it's working.
Better try another $400.
Stop. Instead of using money, use regular paper. And here's a better tip from Progressive on how not to waste money. Don't pay too much for car insurance. Drivers who switch and save could save hundreds. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.